citizens and meatbags across the Twitterverse and YouTube. Welcome to the second episode of the Interlinked podcast. We are stoked to be joined by Jonny on such an exciting day here in crypto gaming. There's a lot to talk about. We've got tons of topics to go through. So to kick things off, I'm going to kick it off to you, Jonny, for a little introduction of yourself, though you need no introduction.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having me. Stoked to have this discussion. Obviously, the crypto gaming markets are as hot as they've been in quite some time. So what's going on, guys? Jonny, a.k.a. Hustlepedia. I host the crypto gaming show over on the Crypto Banter YouTube channel. We have a little over 500,000 subscribers there. I also am the founder of this thing of ours, which is an NFT gaming collection. We share information. We have a treasury. We accumulate a bunch of assets, do some cool stuff for the holders there. And then founder of Nexus Gaming as well, which is going to be an upcoming software for investors and GameFi enthusiasts to be able to discover new games and be able to research all in one platform. So I think that's a simple, short introduction for me. And like I said, excited to get into it. Obviously, the crypto gaming markets are pretty exciting right now. So let's freaking go.
Hell yeah. All right, guys. Well, let's hop into our first topic here. Clearly, if we're all looking at our coin market caps and all of our apps and whatever we're using at the time we're listening, I think there's a strong case to be made right now that the bull is back. So would love to get you guys' thoughts on, we broke 38K on Bitcoin. We broke 2K on ETH. Gaming coins are just going absolutely bonkers. Nick, what are your thoughts there? Like, are we back?
I am so unbelievably torn on this issue. Are we back? Are we not back? First, I'm going to talk about Bitcoin. We're back mostly due to the speculation on this Bitcoin ETF, or at least that's my interpretation of what's been going on. What's going on with like this crypto bull run, I think it's too early to tell if it's anything decoupled from what's going on in the Bitcoin narrative as the main driver, and then crypto gaming just being the strongest narrative underneath of that we're watching the trickle down come from Bitcoin, and then exploding crypto gaming. You're watching, sort of strong narrative movement in liquid ETH staking, AI. These were sort of the bells of the ball, so to speak, during the bear, so shouldn't be surprising there. So I'm a little nervous that if this Bitcoin ETF gets cold water thrown on it, if the Ethereum ETF gets cold water on it, if BlackRock wants to do some cheeky shit where they're like, okay, we're going to get everyone's hopes up just so then we can smash them and go and pick up a bunch of Bitcoin. I guess maybe the best way to boil down my thoughts are, I think if Bitcoin rugs, I don't think crypto gaming is necessarily spared that. That being said, unless there's sort of that cold water situation, I don't see how this about faces. Obviously it's crypto. I don't have to tell you. I certainly don't have a magic ball, but that's my 2 cents right now.
Jonny, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear people are trying to front run this ETF news, and it does seem like big money does know that this thing could potentially get approved. That's the way that I kind of see it, and that's why we're seeing so much money and liquidity flowing into Bitcoin, because for once, although institutions are probably already buying, the retail actually has a little bit of an opportunity to try to front run this thing. So it could set up for a buy the rumor, sell the news if, the ETF, if it's already priced in, right? So that's something to be aware of, and I don't think that crypto gaming is out of the water on the fact that if Bitcoin was to take a dump and go back down into the gutters of the doldrums, the low 20Ks, whatever the case may be, obviously I think altcoins are going to also be subjective to taking that hit as well. But right now, what we're seeing in these markets with the crypto gaming tokens really leading the charge is the fact that over the last 24 months, if you look at the first part of the crypto gaming bull run in 2021, we had a bunch of ideas mainly. We had Axie Infinity, and then we had a bunch of people trying to coattail their ideas. Now we actually have so many quality games, quality projects that are starting to actually release. Blockchains that are having network effect from these things. Studios putting out more than just games. They're putting out their full-blown infrastructures, their own L1, L2 blockchains within their their platform. So when I look at the development, it just makes sense that this has happened and why it's going to keep why it's leading the charge. But I think it's going to continue leading the charge into the bull run. So, it really, to me, it feels like this run is going to continue for a bit. I genuinely think, and I like what Elio said about this on Twitter. I agree with it. What is the max pain scenario right now? Honestly, I feel the same as Elio does in the fact that I think most people are on the sideline. I think most people thought it was going to be really easy to time the bottom this time around. Like they felt like they went through the cycle. They're like, oh, I'll know when to buy. But that it's never that easy, right? And I do feel like a lot of money's sidelined. And if we continue to go up, I think that's actually like max pain scenario because of how many bears and how much money is sidelined. So I think in the short term, we continue to see a little bit of a rise in the markets. And I agree on the fact that, the Bitcoin ETF news could either send us higher, or it could, kind of tank us if we get some bad news. But in the meantime, it seems like the speculation's flying and the market is too. So that's kind of what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, I want to weigh in on this as well. I actually think my own question was a little bit bullshit because I don't really think we know for sure, so I want to call myself out on that. I actually think like the smart thing to do is to play the valuation game, right? I mean, if we look at some of the best investors on the planet, albeit they are anti-crypto, but Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, like they play the valuation game. And so like if we're looking at these projects that hopefully we're all doing our own research on, which we should be doing for sure, and digging into them, and we're coming up with reasonable ideas of what we think they're worth, that would probably give us the best indication of whether we should keep buying or whether we should be holding or whether we should be selling. And then our anticipation of what that is going to turn into in the future, like that seems to be like, regardless of whether we think the market's going to go up or down, if we stick to the valuation game, that probably gives us the best chance of moving forward successfully. That being said, if there is an ETF coming on like a Bitcoin ETF and an Ethereum ETF, and it seems like BlackRock is leading the charge on probably both of those, then the portfolios of all of our parents and grandparents and the trillions of dollars that have been just getting absolutely slapped by the market in the last 2 years, basically just, from the relative highs of 2021 kind of took a V shape down, and it's kind of coming back up, and they're like barely treading water. And then we in crypto are seeing like our portfolios jump 70% in a week, 100% in a week. Like they're going to want some of that action. And so for all that money to be onboarded to crypto, that's a very bullish thing. And it's like, I think there's very few times in history where there has been such an opportunity for so much money to come into a spot where we can set up camp and be ready for when that comes.
Yeah, I want to chime in real quick. I'm in like, I follow a lot of entrepreneurs. I live in Miami, for example, and a lot of the people, they loved crypto, right? And then it tanked, and then they're like, oh, crypto's a scam. But if you look at, then a lot of people recently made a killing in the stock market, and the stock market just had a full-blown bull run. So when people were taking profits out of those things, they're not as in tune with the people that in crypto like us. We know it's a cycle, right? We know there's ebbs and flows to this thing, but in their minds, and people I've talked to, and what I see across social media is like, where am I going to put my money now? There's only a couple of options. Interest rates are high for real estate. They're going from stocks, and what's next? It's crypto. Like those are the three like cyclical things that you could put your money into and try to get some appreciation on. And right now it seems like the focal point for those types of people is crypto, because like I said, they're not really in tune with like 2024, 2025 is when the bull run's going to come, but no one's for certain, like we said here. So that's what I'm seeing. People needed something to put those profits into, and it seems like crypto's a pretty popular place for that to happen.
And building off of that, once you get some positive accumulation in price, like what we've been watching in Bitcoin, what we've been watching in alts over the last month, that news starts to spread. And if you're in sort of like a tumultuous time where you're like, I don't really know, that we're kind of at this top of this stock market, like maybe it could turn down to a bear. You look at like the 70s inflationary bear market, and that time the door was gold and everybody rushed for that door. And you watch those X's stack up on gold versus the USD and versus stocks. And if that door ends up being Bitcoin, and then that door has a bunch of little doors in the back that go to alts and all the little playgrounds behind it, it could be an absolutely crazy setup. And in some ways, that's what makes me a little nervous on the ETF, where I'm like, do they slap this down because they don't want a door for people to go to? If the stock market's floundering, if the dollar is sort of depreciating, and you've got a door to Bitcoin that everyone can access through their computer, which is much more accessible than the gold market was in the 70s, it's sort of I don't want to call it an existential threat, but certainly a threat to sort of the status quo. And so I don't know if that's like a Band-Aid where you rip it off sooner and you want to get this ETF out when there's still some life in the stock market. It's always 3D chess on top of 3D chess, and all you can do is speculate. But, it's certainly an interesting setup going into this year.
Well, I think the one thing too is like everything that we do in crypto, as far maybe I'm in my own bubble, but everything that we do in crypto, like things are still priced in dollars. And like when people take profits, they take them into stable coins, which are basically dollars. And if we look at, I think it's Tethers, like one of the larger holders of US government bonds and US government debt, like on the planet. So from one perspective, it's like, okay, yeah, that is like a door to get out of the system. But at the same time, like people aren't just going to move over their entire portfolios in a day. Like that's not going to happen. We know that's not going to happen. Like there's still going to be a crazy amount of people who just don't believe in it. They don't want anything to do with it. And there are going to be the people who do believe in it that are not going to be all in, there's just, that's just the reality of how things are. So like, but the ones that even are in, it's still a lot based on dollars. So maybe they're just saying like, oh, this can increase dollar circulation around the world even more. And now we have this parallel financial system where we can still be kings. Like that doesn't seem like a bad idea, So maybe they've started to realize that and think like, oh, this helps us if we go out and we become leaders in this. But yeah, no, I think it's speculation too, for sure. But like, I don't think it has to necessarily be a loss for the US dollar as crypto grows.
Yeah. And last thing I'll say on this topic with like the ETF stuff, I know I know this Bitcoin OG. Well, I guess whale's subjective because there's so many different levels, especially in crypto. But I know a Bitcoin OG, been in for a long time, and he does think that this ETF is lingering approval. And his theory is we're going to see a bull run off of that ETF. But he believes that the ETF launch date, the day that people can start to put money in this ETF, that's the top. And I'm like, oh, if we go through that, we're going to go through hell, with the sentiment like, oh, the normies got to put their money in it, like in a terminology way. The normies put their money into Bitcoin and it tanked. What happened? Like, we're going to go through a whole storm of fun again if that happens. But it's not a bad theory. Like, that probably sounds like something that would happen.
Sounds like Max Payne to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think there would have to be a lot of people that are like, okay, the normies have now recognized that they can come in, and the outflows from OGs would have to be greater than the inflows from BlackRock, which if you do the math on that, I don't actually think that's possible. Like there's what, 1.4, $1.5 trillion in all of crypto in totality, including stable coins. Yeah, BlackRock can bring more than that. So I mean, I'm sure that guy has way more Bitcoin than I do, and I don't want to, I don't want to pretend like I know
Oh,
more
of
than him,
course.
but I just don't necessarily think the math could work out on that, in that way. But it is an interesting theory there.
If it happens, then the market is just manipulated.
Oh, well, we know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just how much like manipulation is there.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So, okay, let's go to our second topic. I want to talk a little bit about investor euphoria and thinking about we've been in a bear for so long. Like it's been years since we've seen God candles like this. And now it feels like the FOMO is hitting hard. Like a lot of people are FOMOing it. And it is very difficult to not want to and feel like you're missing out if you do not allocate more, especially to the gaming sector right now, because it's like still based on previous all-time highs, which again, we know the price is a foolish thing to look at. We need to look at market caps. So, but even on from a market cap perspective, like all-time highs are not yet reachieved. So we know that there's a lot more possibility to run. However, there's been so much green, so many gains recently. I mean, the last 7 days, like there have been multiple 100% gains, 2x's, maybe even some 3x's in some places that it's getting a little bit difficult to resist, right? What are you guys' thoughts on like how to manage emotions in a time like this where it's extremely bullish in the micro, but in the macro, we're still like way down from where we were before?
I guess I'll take this one first. Because it's hard because I also have to tend to both sides every time I'm on YouTube. There's always someone in the chat that bought the lows. Like we were saying, like the market cap valuations are everything. So when you buy these things at low valuations, if you have for lack of a better term, the gut, the balls to hold these things in these time periods and make it through the hard times, you're going to come out on top because these valuations were just beaten over the head and so dirt cheap. But for the people that are also on the sideline and asking, like Jonny, what should I do? I'm all in stable coins. Like it's really hard because obviously I'm not in that psychology. Like at this point, I'm not 100% sideline. So I have the best of it, but I also have stables kind of to protect me if something goes wrong. But I think that still you have to play the valuation game, as you said earlier. Like it's all about still finding projects that A, either haven't pumped yet, or B, are just still simply undervalued. Like last night, for example, I went ahead and made a DCA on Immutable X because why? Immutable X was only up 50%. Now it sounds like a lot, right? 50% over the last month. But while other altcoins had done 130%, 200% over the last month. So it's all about your risk tolerance. And it's all about just trying to, I tried on the show, I tried to keep like when we were in those really hard times, like when something just gets slaughtered on the chart and takes these huge dumps, that's the time where you should probably like grab those stables and put in a little bit of a DCA. Because when we see those big spikes in Bitcoin, those big spikes in Ethereum to the downside, typically alts get a little more max pain from that as well. And that's the good time to get in. But it's hard to manage emotions. It's hard not to FOMO into the 300% candles on a $2 million market cap, trying to figure out what Becker's going to pump on his videos type of thing. Like it feels like we're definitely in that season right now. So it's tough. And yeah, like, I don't know. I'm definitely happy to have accumulated some of the lows, but if I was fully on the sideline right now, that would be tough for sure.
100%. Nick, I want to get your thoughts on this too, but just on that idea, Jonny, of saying like IMX had a 50% pump and then you grab the chunk. I think it's up another 25-30% after that. So
yeah,
that just goes to show like these things have a huge runway, and we're probably just at the beginning of the I'm trying to use an airport analogy of a plane taking off. We're at the earlier stages of that runway here. It's just picking up some speed. Like they're still doing their final tray table put up before you take off. I'm gonna leave that analogy. Nick, go ahead. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Dude, first, just want to say, like, I love the point of what you're saying there, Jonny, about how perspective matters so much. Because how you came into this pump completely sort of dictates, how you should be managing emotion, how you should be managing your positions. It is truly hard for me. You guys will probably hear the train coming back. I'm by the train tracks at my office here, so excuse that in the background. It would be hard to be sidelined right now. And it's hard to really put myself in that person's perspective because I actually haven't deployed any capital since the lows. Not the, no one catches the gigolo unless it's an accident. But I had at a certain point been like, okay, I believe in crypto gaming. I'm not going to be able to convincingly call the bottom. Something could happen in the big coins or in, just the general market that I don't see coming, and this thing could run away from me. And so I took, since I managed my entire net worth, I put it all into like sort of percentage like terms. I took 1% and I was like, I'm just buying altcoins, like crypto gaming altcoins. And so, besides that and like my Neotokyo bag, that's really what I've been working with. It's so hard to manage emotions in this because I truly believe that we could be early on this runway and this could gig ascend, either through Bitcoin ETF approval as we wait for approval, or I truly believe that we could get a bad note from BlackRock who's like, I'm actually weighing my decision, or Gensler could queef on us, or there a thousand different things could happen. And I think this could go right past those lows that we were just chilling at. And so really the biggest, like, I never like to give advice, but one of the things I can stand behind maybe the strongest is in these high emotional times, you have to chill the fuck out. And I literally chill out as I went to the store this morning after I was already getting all dopamine high on those charts, picked up a sleeve of ice and popped it in the tub and hopped in that. And I was like, okay, I need to get my dopamine receptors in check. And for some people, that'll be an ice bath. For some people, it's hitting the gym. Sometimes, you get this feeling during this bull segment, whatever we're in, that I can't step away from my computer. But if you don't step away from your computer, you're making decisions highly compromised. So if it's a walk, it's a workout, it's an ice bath, get your head right, or you're not going to be able to make decisions well in this game.
Yeah, that's such a good point. That's such a good point. Like I think too, one of the things is if you're like constantly like sitting there refreshing, it is so difficult to take a longer term view. Now, you may be a high frequency trader and using a bunch of bots or whatever style of investing or trading or whatever that you're using, that'll dictate what you need to do. But like for those that are looking to like be super early into the crypto gaming industry and ride this puppy out for many, 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 many years, which probably will lead you to the best result. If you're playing it right and you have your, you're playing the valuation game, you're betting on great projects and you're really taking a long-term approach, like for the average bear or average bear bull, the average person, that's probably going to be your best bet. Yeah, I think that's such a good, such good advice too. One thing you also might want to do if you are like, oh my God, I absolutely can't help myself, I have to just go do some crazy shit. One thing that like psychologically is useful, I found, is taking like a teeny tiny chunk of your of your nest egg of your stack and putting it into a different trading vehicle. Like maybe you go toss some into like a trading exchange or like a perp exchange or something where you can just take the most degenerate 1000x leverage risks or like whatever it is that you want to do, right? But like take a slice and throw it, and that's like your play money. And like, okay, your like responsible money is your that's your bulk, but then like your tiny little play money here, and then just like let the FOMO hit you on that play money, and then it doesn't matter because you're okay with losing that and you get to get that out of your system. I find that is like super cathartic too, because every once in a while, I'm sure everybody's like, oh yeah, I could totally play with 1000x leverage. And like, then you go do it. And 5 minutes later, you got liquidated and you're like, oh shit, that was dumb. Okay. I remember now why I don't do that, So like, but having that little bit of play money, like that can like help you get it out of your system too. What do you think, Jonny?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of the times actually when people ask me like, I want to buy this token, what should I do? Do you think it's pumped too much? And I'm like, look, I know like psychology and emotions are like really off the rails right now. But here's my recommendation for those types of people who maybe you see a coin that you really liked, you didn't catch the bottom and you have no exposure, but you really want a piece of it. And maybe you do think we're going to continue this run. Maybe you do think this is leading into some sort of an ETF bull market, we'll call it that. Then take your stable coins, look at your stack. What percentage would you normally put into this token? Is it 5% of your port? Like figure out how much you would typically put in and maybe put 20% of that into the token. That way, if it goes down and you at worst case, you still can DCA a little more of your expected position that you have, right? So you want to put 5% in a token, just put 1% if it's inflated or if it's running in this type of market. And then if we get that pullback, all of a sudden you still have a part of that same percentage that you would allocate into these projects. So that way you're not going to lose your behind off of going into these tokens, and then you can lower your average entry. Obviously, DCA it's a beauty if you're doing it at the right times, right? So I would say just go smaller if that's the case. Like if you're feeling the FOMO, but you really love a token and you think is going to continue running, then just put a small sliver of your normal position in, and then like I said, just play it off of where it goes from there. If it goes down, put another small sliver in, and then eventually, like if we have that massive pullback, you'll be able to get your full position in and you won't miss that next run. But that's kind of the way I would look at it.
Totally.
I
And the
think
beauty of that, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think those are great points. And on the inverse side, on the sell side, I had to do this yesterday. I had to practice selling because that was what I did wrong in the last bull market. I literally was talking to my little brother about it. And I'll be completely transparent in this. My biggest bet in my investment career which is relatively short, I'll be granted on that, has been Neotokyo. And obviously Neotokyo just fucking throttled over the last week. And I positioned myself so that, my PFP would never be at stake. I'm, a Neotokyo member till they put me in the ground. But sell some of my bites. And it was so hard for me to do emotionally and be like, and then when sometimes you have to say things out loud to yourself. And I'm like, you're talking about a 5% sell. If you cannot sell 5% on a 2 or 3x pump, you are going to lose every single dollar you put into this game. Like there's, leaving upside, and then there's not managing risk at all. And it sort of depends how much you view risk in the macro environment. But yeah, practice hitting that sell button because that is what makes you money. The buys feel good, but the sells feel terrible. But because you have to kiss all that upside goodbye, you have to be like, that's enough. I'm not having another drink. I'm just going home. So, that's just a little 2 cents there.
And maybe you even don't have to fully go home. Maybe you can just say, I'm going to drink some water for right now, to continue the analogy. Maybe you DC out a portion of your position. And so, okay, I have some here. I'm going to squirrel that away, stick it in some T-bills or, slap it on Coinbase for a relatively safe 5%. And then, or, go, farm stables or whatever it is that you do with your cash when you take it out. But then you got the rest that you can ride the upside. And if this industry is truly going to do what I think we all think it can do, right? For example, I think on CoinMarketCap right now, the whole gaming sector is maybe 10, 20 billion total. Well, Apple for context is $1 trillion market cap. So that's a big difference, guys. I mean, that is a big, big difference just if it got to one, humongous company, but for a whole industry. So if this thing really runs I think we all think it can run, even if you've DCA'd out and preserved your sleep adjusted returns on that one particular section of profit taking, you're still going to be minting and you're going to be just fine. You are going to make it at that point so hard. Yeah, you might miss out on, a couple X's here and there, but you're still going to be just fine.
And I think setting
Yeah.
yourself up for
Go ahead.
success there. Oh, no, Jonny, please.
No. You can finish. I was going to kind of go back to the thought that you had on the sell stuff, but you could go ahead. I'll go after.
All I was going to add, building off of what Ben said there, is setting yourself up for success in these periods is huge too, where it's trading NFTs is harder than trading coins, in my opinion, because there's a picture there and you develop an emotional attachment. Trading one NFT, like you just reached into an NFT that you couldn't quite really afford to get to, is way, way, way harder than that. So like setting yourself up, whether it be NFTs or crypto, to have a big enough position in a high conviction play to be able to sell 5%, 10%, 20% and keep that upside, and for me, at least, I've found that's been able to help me make better decisions.
Yeah, I was going to basically piggyback off of that thought because my flaw last bull, I crushed a lot of tokens. I got in on some great gems at that point in time in the 2021 run. And I took profit. My ideology is, if a token 5X is in your bag, shave it down, right? Take your initial out or at least protect your downside, take a little bit off the table. But at the same time, you also kind of grow an affection towards it's hard. Investing is hard, right? And in crypto, it's a very, beyond NFTs, in crypto specifically, people are maximalists. It's like a cult type of mindset, right? You almost feel bad selling these types of tokens. Like, oh, I was with them since the bottom. I want to hold this thing until whatever. But at the same time, like, it's player versus player. Like crypto is you versus whoever else is holding the liquidity, right? So the way I think of it is if you don't take profit, someone else is going to take profit. And at that point, you're just making yourself the exit liquidity, right? So like last cycle, I took a lot of profit, but I didn't take enough, right? And I definitely, some of the coins started falling, and I saw the gist of that downside before I really got out and saw my final, sum. And I see it in my YouTube comments yesterday. Someone's like, I'm like, if you're feeling euphoric, take some profit off the table. You will never regret doing that because you still have some upside and you can just shave down your position. And there are people that are like, why would we take profit now? We are hardly even up. The market's hardly even moved, etc. But it's, you're never going to lose taking profits. And if you have these 100, 200, 300% pumps in a week and you at least don't think to take profits, I just feel like that's almost, you're setting yourself up to lose. So like you have to drop those emotions. And I think Becker said it well last cycle. A lot of people look for the 10X, the 50Xs. But if you know what you're doing and you just catch a couple of X's, take profit, and then you can ride the rest of the upside. But the big institutional or like big traders, they're not looking for 100Xs. They're looking for the small gains, and then they'll leave a portion in there just to catch that upside. But that's the crypto mentality, right? We got to get 100X or I'm not taking profit. So I think you're never going to go broke taking profit. If you don't take it, someone else is gonna.
Totally.
Oh, I love that line.
And also, like, I think this is important too, and maybe this can kind of help some people just with as far as your strategy. But like, I don't think this cycle, this go round, I don't think I've invested in a single token that's not a productive asset, meaning like it doesn't have staking yield, or it doesn't share a percentage of revenues, or doesn't have some dividend yield, or it's not a node or something like that. So like you can just kind of like wait and it will generate more yield for you. And that is also very powerful for your psychology too, in my opinion, because like I know that even like if you have a target and you're like, okay, it's going to go up, it's going to go down, but my target's up here and it's going to kind of like wiggle like this all the way up. It's way easier to sit there and wait, because if you have a productive asset, you're getting paid to wait, right? Like you're literally getting paid as you wait because it's generating that yield for you while you sleep. So like you don't have to necessarily worry about like catching that Pico top, because let's say you hit a couple X's. Well, you don't have to sell your principal. You can sell your yield. And then that way you still have your principal in, yet you've just basically gotten all of this yield and you didn't have to put in for that necessarily. Like capital appreciation plus dividend yield, like that's your total return, right? So like if you just sell your your dividend yield and you let your capital appreciation go, you can kind of get the best of both worlds. Like, for example, and this is very like unknown outside of the Neotokyo circles. And every time I post a little bit about it, people are always on Twitter like, shh, don't tell people, like, zip it, bro. But like Neotokyo citizens generate yield in bytes. Like that is one of the most undervalued, in my opinion, productive assets in all of crypto, especially right now. And like if you have your citizen and you're generating bytes and bytes 1,000x, like you can be riding that and still like your capital appreciation in your citizen can be increasing as part of your bytes yield can be, DCA for profits. And, you may think, well, bytes are going to go to 1,000. Maybe we can make a case for that. And so you want to hold on to it. But like, there are things you can do. It doesn't necessarily have to be like take your profits and like take out a huge chunk. Like maybe you just take out little chunks along the way just to make sure you see something from it. And it keeps you in the game to where you're not like, oh shit, I got to go drive Uber while I wait for my 1,000x. Like you can take some profits and live so that you can keep your head in the game.
Also, you got to throw a shout out to like one of the best staking products in the game, which is treasuries and money markets. Like, I think you can take stables, you can park them with Coinbase, but I think crypto in general, and like, I've spent enough time with Bitcoin maxis, and I think they're generally right. And you can't spend unlimited amounts of money forever and debase your currency, and eventually you're going to have to pay the check. But for a long time and for the foreseeable future, they're still cutting those yield checks. And so being able to play it safe with either some winnings or some profits and park it over to some place, I like to work backwards, which is, okay, if I cut to the absolute bone and we get into another bear market, what's the minimum amount I can spend and live and keep grinding and keep playing in crypto land? And then be like, okay, can I park that much money in US treasuries and know that I'm going to have that money coming through the door every single month? And you know what? We live in unprecedented times. Maybe the US economy is going to default one day on their treasuries. But I'll tell you what, unless you got Bitcoin sitting physically in your wallet, we're going to watch a lot of shit blow up if the US defaults on its sovereign debt. And I don't know if our yield and our principal is going to be the biggest one of our problems. We might be trading with like 556 if that happens.
100%. 100%. Okay, guys, I think we've talked about this really well. I do want to talk a little bit about the recent Neotokyo and Bytes pump. I think we're all very excited about that. We're seeing a lot of love on Twitter from the founders here. To call the elephant in the Neotokyo room, like I think there was during the bear market some periods where people were getting a little bit they were getting a little disheartened, and I think some people were losing a bit of conviction. And every time I heard people say it, I was like, guys, just wait it out. Like we're coming. It's loading up. But I think now we all see like, hey, our patience and our conviction is really, it's been paying off, and we're starting to really see some action there. But just as far as like, we're all in this community, or those that are listening, I'm sure you've been kind of hearing from the outside, looking in from the outside. Like, what would you guys say are kind of the biggest takeaways here from this period of sustained low conviction from a lot of folks, and then now it's like, okay, now we have some meaningful reflection of our internal courage and conviction being reflected in outward markets.
Yeah, I think I'll go first here. And like one thing, especially in NFT land specifically, it's all about trying to find projects who are continuing to push the boundaries, are continuing to innovate, and are still bringing new features, still bringing new people into the community that are of value. And one thing about Neotokyo specifically is it's always been a community where the people matter more than almost like anything else. Like the people inside the Citadel make the Citadel, right? So I think it's a good focus. Like Becker and Elio don't make Neotokyo. It's the people inside of it, what it's comprised of. And although, Becker and Elio have a good influence on the founders that come through the door, you can go in that Discord, you can find value, you can get alpha, you can collaborate, you can find employees for your startup in gaming, you can find developers to help you out, you can find marketing people to help you out. The amount of connections that type of community can truly make you. Forget Moonbirds. Like Neotokyo is the networking hub of Web3, in my opinion, because the relationships I've made there far triumph any other community that there is. So, like, you just have to read deeper than the surface, right? People fudded the floor price. People said that Neotokyo was like during the bear, you would see literal people like Becker started this NFT and it's a rug, and it was still like a 4 ETH floor. I don't know how that could be a rug, right? But just the sentiment was so low, and they'll try to take shots at these types of things any chance they can. But now that things are going well, and then, oh, no mistake, it's in the crypto gaming landscape, all of a sudden we see more founders coming through the door. We see more sentiment coming through the door. People are more liquid, and the people who are on the sidelines want to get a piece of it. So it just shows you markets, they'll make you think something's sour when it's not, and then all of a sudden it's the best thing in the room, right? So it's really tough, but I think it's awesome to see. Neotokyo's definitely been through the doldrums of sentiment, publicly and privately. I think some people obviously have been in and out over the time periods, but those who stuck through, it's impressive conviction first and foremost, and I think they all knew what they had in their hands, and they weren't willing to cough it up. So that's kind of the way I see it. And at NFT Land, you just have to find those communities where, the founders aren't. I think it's a liberty if the founders aren't everything. Like Pudgy Penguins has a great team, but Luca Nets is a great founder. So Luca does facilitate a lot of value to that community. So there's a difference there with like Elio and Becker. They're not every single day giving that value in the Discord or whatever the case may be. It might not come from the top down, but I think that's what makes Neotokyo beautiful.
Dude, could not agree more. Throughout the bear, it was like the number one complaint. It honestly what it sounded like was a community, like when at the peak bear, the biggest people who were pissed off sounded like they were a tiny group of people whose dad went out for smokes and never came back, and would be like, Becker, he's abandoned us. I want him to come in here and essentially put this entire community on his back. And really what was overlooked was that you want a community based on its members. And to your point, if you've got a leader who's all dialed in and is building a community on his back or her back, that can be super effective too. That's a Napoleon, that's an Alexander the Great, that's a Julius Caesar. Those work, but those don't work without Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great, or Napoleon. Once those leaders go away, then that community tends to fracture or devolve into something else. When you've got a group of people who are all committed to this same ideal, crypto gaming, it makes a really powerful mesh that makes us much more, something that can last much longer. And then when the leadership really comes in and starts to push, it's just an accelerant. And we really saw that sort of throughout this process, at least in my opinion, where we kept the torch alive. Neotokyo kept building through all of crypto gaming. Really, my thought around sort of my conviction and why I, double, triple, quadruple down sort of at the bottom was I'm I don't see this anywhere else. And I was researching and doing research for NGMI Labs and doing research for the Neotokyo team and involved in all these communities. I didn't see anything that people were grinding in the way that Neotokyo was grinding. Now, of course, there are exceptions to that. There's lots of wonderful communities. I'm not Neotokyo is great, everything else is shit. Of course, that's just a silly opinion. But really, it was the fact that it was focused in an area that I thought was going to be successful, crypto gaming. That seemed inevitable to me as a gamer. And then I didn't see anyone else in that space that was as well positioned for the niche that we were going after. And I was like, okay, this is worth taking a real swing. And honestly, today, has been borderline surreal. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if I just get like ripped out of this podcast and I wake up and like we're just in the depth of a bear and this was all just some sort of sweet dream or hallucination. It feels like that.
Oh, dude, you're totally right. And like, I was just kind of laughing as you were saying the comment about people kind of like wanting to be handheld and have like this, this parental figure. Like at the end of the day, guys, like we're all adults and we all signed up for this and we all knew like what was going on in the beginning. Like we can't rely on other people to do it for us. Like we got to carve out our own destiny. You know what I mean? And also like you said of it being like we're each one piece of the whole fabric, right? Like we're all part of it. We're all straw in the big haystack. And like the stronger that we are together and the more that we're all pushing through and really like going hard with it together, like wow, that's something special that we can build. I mean, we have thousands and thousands of people that are entrepreneurs, builders, gamers, investors, programmers, and we're all every day like out here grinding and building and learning together, and that compounds day after day after day. Our learnings compound, our earnings compound, what we're building compounds, the synergies we can build between the projects together compounds, and then we're all together under one banner. I mean, that is a really really cool recipe, and I don't think we know what that final dish is going to look like, but I think we're going to be very pleasantly surprised, especially because it can grow to become something much bigger than any one person ever could. It's kind of like, if you think about it, it's kind of like a religion, like there was no way that any religion could exist if it relied on one specific person to take it to the end of the goal line. And I mean, if we look at religions, it's very similar to what goes on in a really strong NFT community. And, for Neotokyo, for example, like you have your underlying values, right? Like you have like your texts, which are like the blog, the Neotokyo blog and some of the original ideas behind it. You have your values of like, hey, we want to be the Illuminati of crypto gaming. We believe that this thing is going to take off and be something really important and really special. And we want to be a part of it. We want to be on the bleeding edge. And then we have our traditions every month, every year, every week. We have the different things that occur there. And so to me, the more we almost model it like that, where it is very decentralized and that it relies on not one individual person, but every individual part of it makes it stronger and adds to the network effects, that is where we get super, super long lasting effect. And that's where we tap into something very powerful.
No doubt about it.
We're all nodding our heads here like, hell yeah.
Oh, yeah, for the listeners.
I mean, I think everyone covered a little bit different piece, and I think it all culminates into what you see today.
Yeah, 100%. Well, guys, we're getting close here to our time. I do think we should cover, because we covered the ETH ETF news. That was kind of one of the big ones. There was an article that came out, and it was by Cointelegraph. So, take it for a grain of salt. But we did see that, according to the article, that the Chinese government has now guaranteed legal protection for NFTs. Guys, I think this could be freaking huge, because if this is true and this actually goes the distance and gets enacted, what more validation do we need that digital property rights are imperative? And what more validation do we need that China, the world's second largest economy and, arguably positioned to become the biggest, if not, definitely one of the top contenders from now until the end of time. And then the US has to compete if we want to stay relevant, so that, arguably that will create the necessity for the US to also do something similar. Like, what more validation do we need? What a big step. What are our thoughts here?
I mean, I think the digital property rights, it just has made sense. Like, I used to be the nut job, and I still kind of think this in a way. Don't get me wrong, but I think that eventually, like, we could literally live in a world where you get pulled over by a cop and you can't give them a fake car insurance, or like you can't fake your car insurance. You can't fake your car title. Like you searching for your car title and your folders in your home. Like, what if it was just digital on the blockchain on an, like something that's absolutely like bulletproof, right? It's a soul bound, so to speak. Like it can't be no compromise, nothing like that. Like the levels that digital property rights could go to, between art, between obviously we're in the gaming space, like video game assets, to literal like legal documents, titles for homes, titles for car. Like, I think it could go very far eventually. I mean, we just also, once again in the gaming space, we see Roblox, like one of the most popular kids games out there, saying NFTs are like in our future, like literally word for word. That's what they're saying. I think it's undisputed, and like you said, a country like China having that type of conviction, for a lack of a better word, on what an NFT can be, and that it is, it should be protected legally. It should have its properties, and it's immutable, to use blockchain terms. It's immutable features to, yeah, like it is who it's. The properties of it are undisputed. You own it. There's no better way to prove ownership in the world than NFT technology. So I think it makes a whole lot of sense, and it definitely is good to see like the, the we're the West, right? So that's the East, right? Technically.
Yeah.
So it's the East catching on to it, because over here in like the West, things just aren't up to speed like that. So when you look at the other side of the coin, what's over in China, Singapore, obviously Dubai's been way ahead of the curve, but like you're seeing it unfold, and I think it's just a matter of time until that's a worldwide thing where the protection and the use case for it shows itself.
Yeah, I definitely think digital property rights are paramount. I mean, it just makes too much sense. If you're going to put your time and energy into something, whether it be your Twitter feed or your Minecraft, like little universe, you're making a little virtual whatever, or the achievements that you have on Xbox Live or your Medium blog, like no one should be able to just with a keystroke, like remove that from existence. Digital property rights are the fundamental building block that we've essentially built our economy on and our country on. So it's going to be interesting. I think this highlights a few things. First, it's going to put the US in a hard debating position to be like, okay, so communist China has digital property rights, but the US doesn't want to have digital property rights. Like,
Exactly.
are we in the upside down? Where's 11? Like, and then, to build off that, because I don't want to harp on that too much, the US, or excuse me, this really shows that the East is just going to be so important in our space, in crypto gaming, in crypto period, in video games. I mean, this is just another drop in the bucket, a big drop, granted, but another drop in the bucket behind Japanese government officials saying how important the metaverse is, how it's a main economic focus, the gaming development in Korea, how Axie blew up in the Philippines. Like Asia's leading the way in a lot of these crypto and particularly gaming arenas. And I think it's a lesson for really projects like, Neotokyo or TTOO, or, Axie was right on this, but Dead Drop, you really got to figure out a way to facilitate and be accessible to Asia. And it's honestly something that I hope to have out soon. If you're listening to this long in the future, it's probably already out, but have this podcast in Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Spanish. Like the technology's there. You can just feed it into these AI programs. So there's a lot of low hanging fruit to make yourself accessible to Asia. And I think it's going to be, a big make or break for a lot of projects.
100%. You and I, Nick, we did an AMA not too long ago where we were talking to the
Square Enix.
Symbiogenesis team. And they were just talking about how much their culture embraced video games already. And I think we see like Japan is a powerhouse when it comes to creating culture. and setting like the cultural bar very high on the creative perspective. But they were saying their issue is they couldn't market outside of Japan. They had a difficult time doing that. So like, I just think it's only a matter of time before like the inefficiencies of globalism decrease. And obviously blockchain rails are the rails that make that the easiest and the fastest. And yeah, I think we might be even underestimating, as bullish as we all are, we may be underestimating how big our space and our industry really can get when the whole world catches on and the whole world is participating. And I think it's going to be fun to see what happens.
It's funny that video Mark Cuban put out a few weeks ago. He was like, someone was like, "Why are you still in on NFTs?" He was like, "Well, yeah, the NFT market has crashed quite a bit, yada yada." And he basically tried his hardest, but he was like, don't go buy any, don't speculate, yada yada. But he's like, you're going to look back on it and say, you should have bought that NFT. And I'm looking at that as just a perspective on the whole space, right? Every disruptive technology gets backlash. For those of us here, in the I think it was late 1970s or like early 80s, there was a video game crash, full blown. There were too many distributors. There were too many companies trying to make a console, trying to make different IP and games. And people thought video games weren't going to last the test of time. So imagine that, right? But NFTs are one of those types of disruptive technologies that could go against the grain. And the things you can do with it, between property ownership, between loyalty programs, video games, all the different things. We could go on and on with the use cases. But I just view it, and Cuban's video specifically, when he's like, you're going to look back and you're going to be like, I should have bought that NFT. I think that's like the whole space, right? I think the technology will prove itself. We'll get out of this little JPEG monkey picture phase, and it'll be a much bigger picture here in a few years.
100%. Gentlemen, on that note, I think we've done this episode justice. Jonny, appreciate you tuning in. Nick, as always, it's a pleasure. And for everyone watching and listening, whether it's today in 2023 or whether it's in 3037, hope you have a great day, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Take care.